Hello everyone, welcome to the Daily News Protocol of the Hindu newspaper analysis contributed by Vishnu IS Academy. Today we are going to see the news article for the date 16th April 2022. Let's see the first news article for today. That is nothing but recently our respected Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi has announced that number of doctors in India are going to be increased in coming 10 years. What is that? Why the numbers are going to be increased? Why? Because of the initiatives, government initiatives taken so far till now, giving that results, the Prime Minister is promising us. In that scenario, let us see some government initiatives. The National Medical Commission. What is NMC? It is nothing but a new body that replaced the MCI, Medical Council of India. What are its objectives? Its objectives are nothing but why NMC is replaced MCI. There were huge protests against the MCI because of the malpractices and the higher corruptions in the allocation of the number of seats of medical seats. So, to answer all those, the MCI was replaced by the NMC. Now, let's see the objectives of the NMC. To curb malpractice and to increase the accountability and quality. Quality is important. Now in our India, we can see the less quality in the medical sector, medical education sector. So to answer that, the NMC is working in that, and also to improve the number of medical seats and also to lower the cost of medical education. We can say that the medical education is quite expensive in our country. So also to answer that, the NMC will work on that area and to restructure the medical licensing systems and also ranking the medical colleges, thereby to increase the competition among the colleges, thereby to increase the quality of the medical education, and the standardizing entry requirements at medical schools across the country. So it is one of the very good and nice initiative to increase the medical quality of the medical education in India. And one more initiative is that PMSSY, Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana. It is nothing but to increase the establishment of the medical sciences, the institutes of medical sciences. That is nothing but the AIIMS, All India Medical Sciences. 22 such organizations were planned to establish. Till now, 18 such were made operational under this initiative. Moving forward, the next initiative is the National Exit Test, the next exam. Next exam is gaining quite importance than the NEET. Why? Because it will be a substitute to the NEET by the year 2023. The next exam will be made mandatory for all Indian graduates who are going to do MBBS and also for international medical graduates. For both these categories, the next exam would be made mandatory. And also this aims to increase the accountability, transparency and the consistency in that exam. Moving forward, our next news article to be discussed for today is the Sri Lanka Crisis. From a month ago or from a few weeks ago, we are seeing in our news articles that Sri Lanka is in dire economic crisis and food crisis. What happened in Sri Lanka? Why Sri Lanka is going to bankrupt? Today we got a wonderful news article in the editorial that whether Sri Lanka is going for a bankruptcy or a redemption, whether it is a better chance to rely completely on IMF or to search any alternatives to get rid of that economic crisis. In that scenario, let's study some basic scenarios what happened in the Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, what happened is that recently the prices of all the goods of daily need like food, fuel and paper and medicine, the prices of all these daily needs were hiked a lot. Even the exams, at a certain point, the exams for the students were also cancelled because of lack of the paper and ink. And also there were huge crises for the medicinal products and medicines. All these things are disturbing the common man life and the entire economy of the nation. So in this scenario, let us see some reasons for this. Those are nothing but there are two main reasons for that. The faulty policy making and the policy choices taken by the government of the Sri Lanka over the decades. If we can study that deeply, in Sri Lanka, two problems have arrived. Faulty policy making and policy choices. What are these? Generally, for any nation, what happens is any developing nation or any country that wants to develop will get some loans from other areas, other markets, external markets. Those are nothing but the external debts, external borrowings and commercial borrowings. If we can study all these in detail, the loans to be acquired by the nations would be of two types: the concessionary loans and the commercial loans. Okay, the concessionary loans are nothing but those loans which can be got by the organizations like World Bank, ADB, not only these two, some international world banks or international banks and stabilized and standard organizations can give such loans. Why? Because they will give those loans with a very comfortable and very less and negotiable interest rates, like nearly 1%. And the loan repayment period will also be very comfortable, that is till 25 to 50 years. But what happened in Sri Lanka is that Sri Lanka has exhausted all the limit of these concessionary loans. Sri Lanka has taken all the loans within the limit that were given by these organizations. So after crossing that limit, they will refuse to give such concessionary loans to such nations. But Sri Lanka wants to, right from nearly year 2010 onwards, Sri Lanka wanted to develop its nation further, to develop and improve its infrastructural projects like highways and all. So to achieve that, Sri Lanka wanted to go for the commercial loans, which is a very risky one. Why? Because these loans will be acquired by the other countries, but they can't guarantee such a less interest payments and such a very comfortable and huge loan repayment periods. So that's why the interest rates for such loans could be near 5 to 6%, and also the loan repayment period would be like 5 to 10 years. You can see the difference here, right? It can be very risky if a nation can't repay back that loan, right? So that's how Sri Lanka slowly entered into that debt trap, thinking that they thought that they can develop such a developmental projects like highways and some like Hambantota project also, the port also was constructed getting these loans, like from some developed countries like USA, China and all. Okay, what happened later on that Sri Lanka couldn't repay back those loans. Why? What happened here? They had planned very clearly, they had developed such development projects, but if any nation got such a huge loans and risky loans, it should diversify its export regime and its dollar income. There are two such points: exports and the dollar income. These are very much important to repay back any such external debts, external loans. But what happened in Sri Lanka is that for any dollar income, Sri Lanka has depended on very narrow diversified areas. Like in tourism, it has depended on tourism and export of plantation crops like tea, coffee. Clear? So there is a lack of diversity to get that dollar income from other nations. Okay, and also some factors like pandemic, 2020 pandemic, and some attacks in the bomb attacks in the country all added a fuel to the crisis of the dollar income. So all these comes under the faulty policy making and the policy choices. And the immediate reason that brought this Sri Lanka into the economic downturn is that the policy making which was faulty. Why? Because recently Sri Lanka has banned the import of chemical fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers. Why? Why? Because to develop and to introduce and to improve that extensively the organic farming. Organic farming is very nice initiative. It is very sustainable and resilient to be conducted, but the improper implementation of such an initiative would result such a economic crisis. We will see that. What happened in Sri Lanka is that it has banned the chemical fertilizers completely, but the organic farming, a call was given to all farmers of the nation to conduct the organic farming, but the input cost of that type of farming is very high. Because of the burden, the farmers are diversified their field of livelihood and they didn't undergo such organic farming, and they were not left with any alternative. Why? Because there are no such chemical fertilizers also. They couldn't go under the normal agriculture also. So as a result, the agri products has reduced to very less. Like if earlier it was 30 kgs, now it was only 5 kgs. That much huge difference was resulted because of these steps. Okay, ultimately it has resulted in the food crisis. What is this? The price hike of all the daily needs. The price of milk powder went till the 800 rupees per packet, and also the price of rice, onion, oil and all has risen a lot because of this scenario. So this is the faulty policy making and the policy choices chosen by the Sri Lanka over the decades. So those are all the two major mistakes done by the Sri Lankan government. So now Sri Lanka is moving forward and seeing some alternatives to come out of that risk. Recently, the government of Sri Lanka has taken two major decisions, that to default on its external debt and to negotiate with the IMF to restructure its debt scenarios. These are all the two decisions taken by the government. Now in our discussion, we will focus on this, whether these decisions are good for the country or not. So focusing on the IMF solely. If any country focuses on the IMF solely, what happens is that the IMF will become a loan organization to control entire the debt structure of the country. The country will not left with any alternative to take any own decisions on its development. So still focusing on the unrestricted imports and rolling over debt with more borrowings, which is not a sustainable way to be followed. We have seen that in Sri Lanka there is a less production in the country. So because of that, Sri Lanka is still focusing more on the imports. Just a minute ago, we have seen that the dollar income should be increased. But if there were unrestricted imports, why that country can improve its dollar income? Okay, that is a big problem. And also it will result to satisfy those costs incurred by those unrestricted imports, will result to get more borrowings and further. Okay. Okay, if we can study these, the constitutional and legal solutions would be a best way forward to address all those issues. So, the disparate reliance on IMF would be a big mistake to be followed, to be relied on the IMF. So, now let us see a report of IMF in which IMF has given some recommendations. That is nothing but the IMF staff report 2022. In that, IMF recommends any nations which are going under the economic crisis to get rid of those debt traps. The recommendations of IMF would be like this. It will suggest to focus on the fiscal consolidation. What is fiscal consolidation? To depend the government initiatives taken forward to help the government to gain the economic benefits. Okay, such an initiatives all integrated together will come under the fiscal consolidation, nothing but to raise its income, the nation's income. Okay, and also that can be achieved through increasing tax rates and the energy pricing reforms. If such things can be done, the population and the citizens of the country would go again into some difficulties. Of course, it can be a recommendation by the IMF. And the restoring debt sustainability. The debts taken can be maintained in a sustainable manner. If that nation is not in a condition to repay back that debt, it shouldn't go further and further to take extra debts. In Sri Lanka, what does is that it has taken huge loans, commercial loans from other nations, right? To repay those loans, it is taking another loans from other nations. To repay a loan, we shouldn't take another loan. It will bring a nation, a person or anyone into a debt trap. A vicious cycle will be created. So that's why the debt structure would be sustainable. And also near-term monetary policy, like tightening any inflation targetings. Any strict targets of inflation could be put as a target, and also a market determined flexible exchange rate. It should be market determined. It is important. The exchange rate should be driven by the market determinants. And also targeted social safety nets. Okay, all these recommendations are very well and good, suggested by the IMF report. That was recent report of 2022. But what Sri Lanka is being done? In Sri Lanka, those recommendations were already exhausted, were already followed. What happened here is the exchange rate has been floated. Already it has been floated. So it can't take the recommendation of IMF. And also higher costs of imports are already passed out. Okay, and interest rates have been doubled to 14%. It is very huge. 14% is very huge. And also it indirectly risks the small businesses. Right, they can't get any loans with such a higher interest rates. And also energy price hikes were already hiked a lot, and the costs of petrol and cooking gas are already hiked a lot, and the burden was ridden on the consumers, transferred to the consumers. So like that, all the recommendations suggested by the 2022 report of IMF were already implemented, and already they have crossed the limit. Now, what Sri Lanka can do? So, studying this scenario as a case, the IMF report, which calls for growth enhancing structural reforms, increasing female labor force participation. The IMF report is again suggesting to increase the female labor force participation, so that the human resource would be increased if we can encourage the female in such a crisis. And also unemployment, reducing the youth. I mean, it is suggesting here that to utilize the human resource available in the country. and also liberalizing the trade, developing a wide-reaching and the coherent investment and promotion strategy. All this can be suggested, but our experts are analyzing that to solely focusing on the female labor force would tighten the situations. It can't be followed idealistically in all circumstances. Okay, so here is that point. So Sri Lanka has to do? Okay, it will only increase the debt stock if Sri Lanka is relying on such recommendations. So the best forward here to focus on the caste transfers. If I consider any nation, there would be two sections, right? Rich and poor. The wealthier families, the population of wealthy and rich will have so much of money with them. They can transfer considering any social service or any wealth tax. By considering these, the cash transfer would be in a circulation entire the nation, so that the cash can be circulated and the poor can get the money, so that it will rise the purchasing capacity of the poor, so that stabilizes the economy on a whole. That is the suggestion given by our experts. Moving forward, the food vaccine as right, more so for TB patients. There is a wonderful article on tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is nothing but a disease caused by the Mycobacterium TB, tuberculosis. Okay, it was like a pandemic certain years ago. Why? Because it can't be controlled with one drug. What happens here is, it is the microbiome, the bacterium is getting modified and it's getting resistance for the drugs. That resulted in the MDR TB, multi-drug resistant TB. And also, if we can't take such steps to control this, it can go till the XDR TB. Okay, if we can see some facts of this, it can be cured by the ioniazid and rifampicin. But the microbe got resistant for these medicines. That's why a new medicine had to be researched. That was the fluoroquinolone. Okay, what happens here is, the patient-centric treatment is very much important of the situation. Why? Because if the patient is less infective with the disease, he shouldn't be treated with such a powerful medicines. What happens here is, if such a patient have less amount of bacteriums, if such a high powered medicines are given, that bacterium is getting resistant for that medicine. So afterwards, when it was spreaded to other people and populations, that microbe is getting resistant. So it's becoming out of hands of doctors to cure such disease. Such a scenario is happening with this microbe. So moving forward, our experts are suggesting to move forward to patient-centric scenario, but not drug-centric. Depending on the situation of the patient, the treatment should be suggested. Okay, that is one of the most important point. And also, it is more prevalent in the low-income earning countries. Why? Because the disease occurrence is widely among the poor communities, the slum areas and all. Why? Because the spread is very easily with the cough, with the air. So that's why the drug routine, it is difficult to maintain a drug routine leading to MDR and XDR TB. So that's why the circulation should be limited and the patient-centric treatment should be carried forward. So what can be the way forward for this? How can this problem can be treated? With the undernutrition, without addressing undernutrition, this disease can't be settled. If we can see our previous experiences, during the Second World War, there was the crisis of this pandemic of TB. with good nutrition, our Russian and British soldiers could pass on with that pandemic. So, not the medicines entirely, but the nutrition, the good nutrition could be a best way to settle that disease cycle. Okay, that is the main scenario of this concept of this article. In this regard, let us see some scheme Nikshay program. Under this program, cash benefit of 500 rupees per month would be given to the TB patient to buy food but not the medicine. Why? Because with good nutrition, such patients can get resistance and immunity so that they can get cure with that disease. And also, we are in a situation like a syndemic. Syndemic means what? The existence of two pandemics at a time. Here the author is saying that the both undernutrition and TB, considering these as two pandemics, we are in a situation like syndemic. Until and unless we address this undernutrition, the TB can't be addressed completely. So suggestions are there to focus on the food vaccine. Nothing but good nutrition, providing good nutrition to the poor people or the diseased people. Okay. Moving forward, our next news article for today is EDAR portal to speed up accident compensation claim. What is EDAR here? EDAR is E-Detailed Accident Report. It will give the instant report of any accident if that occurs. It is nothing but the E-version of IRAD. What is IRAD? Integrated Road Accident Database. Earlier it is giving the report of any accidents, but now EDAR will give instant information of any accident to the authorities or to the investigating officers. And also it will help in accident compensation claims to give faster recoveries, to help or to give faster information. In those areas, the EDAR portal, web portal will help. And also it will get connected with other government initiatives like Vahan, which would get access to information on driving license and the registration. The driving license and registration information would be with Vahan. Along with the help of this, the EDAR will work. And the geotagging and site mapping are also important inputs given by this web portal to the investigating officers so that the problems occurred with that accident can be addressed as soon as possible. Moving forward, let us see the next news articles. That is nothing but the prelims facts of the day. The Baiskahi mela. Baiskahi mela is nothing but a Sikh festival, a festival of the Sikh community. It is also called as Baiskahi. Okay, it is conducted in the states Punjab, Haryana and Chandigarh. It is the spring harvest festival of the Sikhs. Okay, it is also celebrated in commemoration of the Khalsa Panth. Khalsa Panth is nothing but the celebration of the togetherness of the Sikh community that was started by the Guru Gobind Singh in 1699. Okay, the next new fact for today is that S-400. There is a news on S-400. If you can see the background of this, there were threats from the US earlier, like in the years 2016, 17, 18. So in that, regarding the arms defense sector and their imports and exports. So considering those situations, India and Russia has signed an agreement in 2018 to import the S-400 missile systems. The first regime of that S-400 was recently imported to India. In this month and in this week, the second regiment has to be imported, but because of the war crisis and war scenarios in the Russia, that may be delayed further. So in that backdrop, let us see some facts of this. It is an anti-aircraft missile defense system, anti-aircraft, and also it is a mobile surface to air missile. It is the surface to air missile. And also it consists of an integrated multifunction radar. It will have a radar with it and with autonomous detection. It will detect autonomously any object coming in its way. It targets those systems. It also consists of anti-air missile launchers in it, and it will have the command and control missiles. Okay, moving forward, let's see next fact for the day. The INIP 2015-2030. It is a program, it is a plan, the Indian Navy Indigenization Plan. It was initiated in the year 2014. The objective of this is to enable indigenous development of the equipment and systems of regarding the Navy. That is nothing but the indigenization of Navy. Okay, the government pushed to cut down on defense imports. That is a very healthy gesture of the government. Why? Because one nation shouldn't depend entirely on imports of defense equipments. It should produce itself its domestic arms and defense equipment. So that is the one scenario. Government has pushed down those scenarios. This plan focuses on the areas to develop such technical weapons and systems and sensors like anti-submarine weapons, anti-ship missiles and combat management and communication systems. All these things will be indigenously developed under this plan. Okay. And there is also one more plan called the Naval Aviation Indigenization Roadmap, NAIR 2019-22. It is recently will be revised till 2022-2027. Okay, it is all the fast moving aircraft mandatory things will be made and the repair systems will be undertaken under this plan. Okay, so these are all the news articles to be discussed for today. Let us meet in another interesting session tomorrow. Thank you.